Night patrol does not begin when the sun goes down. It begins when the land decides it is finished listening. Out here, that moment is never announced. No change in temperature, no sound, just the understanding that you are no longer welcome to make noise. I had been with Navajo Nation police long enough to recognize that feeling. The quiet that doesn't feel empty. The dark that feels settled. Dispatch called it a routine shift. There is no such thing. The radio crackled once before the dispatcher spoke. Welfare check. Remote residence. Caller reports lights on all night. No response at the door. The address meant nothing to me. That happens often. Out here, directions are memory-based. If you don't already know the place, you're not meant to find it quickly. I acknowledged the call and began driving. The paved road lasted 12 minutes. After that, it was dirt, then stone. Then a track that only existed because other vehicles had once been foolish enough to pass through. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the dark. Everything beyond that tunnel felt patient. The house did not appear gradually. 1 second there was nothing. The next it was directly in front of me, single story, weathered siding. No fence, all interior lights were on, every room. That alone was enough to make me pause. People who live this far out do not leave lights on like that. Electricity is not casual here. I shut off the engine. The silence pressed in immediately. I stepped out of the vehicle. My boots sounded too loud. I knocked on the door, once, waited, knocked again, still nothing. No television noise, no movement, no dogs. The door was unlocked. That is common here. What was not common was how cold the air felt inside. Not abandoned cold, held cold. Every light in the house was on. Kitchen, hallway, bedroom, bathroom. The house was fully furnished, photos on the walls, shoes by the door, a jacket hanging from a chair, no sign of a struggle, no sign of departure. The phone sat on the kitchen table. The screen was dark. But when I placed my hand near it, I could feel warmth, recently used. I radioed dispatch, informed them the residence was empty, asked for confirmation on the caller. There was a pause. Static filled the gap. Dispatch read the name slowly. It was the name of the resident. I told them that was not possible. They did not argue. They logged it. That was the first moment. Something settled into my chest. Not fear, recognition. I had not yet returned to my vehicle when the radio activated again. Another welfare check. Different location. Same report. Lights on. No response. I acknowledged automatically. That is how training works. You respond first. You think later. The drive took longer. There were no landmarks this time. Just land folding into itself under the headlights. When I arrived, the second house looked different, but inside it was the same. Lights on, unlocked door, no one home. This time, the radio crackled while I stood in the living room, low static, uneven, like interference moving closer, then pulling away. I stepped outside. The sound stopped. 2 houses, 2 empty interiors. 2 calls placed from phones located inside those homes. Dispatch did not mention the similarity. They never do. You are not encouraged to connect dots out here. The third call came before I reached the main road. Dispatch sounded tighter now. More formal. Another welfare check. They did not say routine. The house was farther out than the others. The road vanished twice. I had to trust the direction more than the terrain. When I arrived, I did not exit the vehicle immediately. I watched the house. Lights on, no movement. The windows reflected my headlights. For a moment I thought I saw motion behind the glass. Not a figure, a shift, like something adjusting its position. I waited. Nothing happened. I entered, same result. This phone was off the hook, not disconnected. Off the hook. A dial tone filled the room. Steady, unconcerned. I did not touch it. I did not clear the third call right away. I stood inside that house longer than I needed to, not because I was searching, because the quiet felt active, like it was doing something while I wasn't watching. Every light stayed on, no flicker, no hum change, perfectly steady. I radioed dispatch to advise scene was clear. My voice sounded normal to me. Too normal, dispatch acknowledged, then asked if I was still inside the residence. I told them I was standing outside. They paused, then apologized, said there must have been a delay. Before I reached my vehicle, another call came in, same category, welfare check. This one was closer. Dispatch gave directions instead of an address. That meant something. Directions are used when the system doesn't recognize a location as fixed. I acknowledged again. The word felt automatic now. The road back narrowed quickly. My headlights stopped feeling like protection. They felt like an announcement. I noticed something then. Every time I slowed down, the radio crackled louder. Every time I accelerated, it quieted, as if speed mattered, as if motion mattered. I did not stop. This house had a porch light that was new. It was the only light turned on. The rest of the house was dark. I stayed in the vehicle for a full minute. The porch light did not flicker. I keyed the radio, advised dispatch of my arrival. Before they responded, the porch light turned off. The house disappeared into darkness. Dispatch answered. Asked me to confirm location. I described it. They said that wasn't the address they had given. They said the call was still coming in from inside the house. The door was unlocked. Again, inside the house was completely dark. No interior lights, no glow. The air felt thicker here, not colder, just heavier. I used my flashlight. The beam felt narrow, like it was being absorbed. Furniture, photos, personal belongings, everything intact. The phone was on the kitchen counter, screen lit, dialing, redialing. No number displayed. Just a call in progress. I backed away from it. The radio crackled behind me. Then a voice came through. Not dispatch. It was mine. My cadence, my tone, reporting a clear scene, using my badge number. I did not respond. The voice continued, calm, professional. It sounded like it had practiced. Dispatch changed mid-incident. That is not common. The new dispatcher sounded younger, less familiar with the land. I informed them of multiple welfare checks with no occupants. They acknowledged, then asked if I could return to the first location. I asked why. They said they were receiving another call from that address. I told them it was empty. They said the caller insisted someone was there now. The road back looked different. Same direction, same turns, but longer. The landmarks felt misplaced. The red rock formation appeared twice. I did not remember passing it twice before. I did not mention this. The first house was still lit, every window. Same as before, no new vehicles, no movement. I approached more slowly this time. I did not knock. Inside, nothing had changed, except the phone. It was off the table, on the floor, screen cracked, still warm, still active. Dispatch patched me through without warning. The caller breathed for several seconds, then spoke. They said my name. Not urgently, not frightened. They asked why I had left. They said the lights were for me. I ended the call. Dispatch did not ask why, they logged it. Calls began stacking. 3 welfare checks, different locations, same description, lights on. No answer. Dispatch asked if I needed backup. I said yes. They told me the nearest unit was over an hour away. I already knew that. I parked at a turnout, left the engine running, listened to the radio. Static moved in patterns now. Not random. Predictable, like breathing. Sometimes underneath it, I heard voices, not words, rhythm. The way people speak when they are waiting their turn. Backup acknowledged, different officer, different voice. Relief hit me harder than expected. They said they were responding to a welfare check. I asked which one. They named the second house. I told them it was empty. They said dispatch told them someone was home now. I told them to be careful. They laughed softly, said it was probably nothing. 20 minutes later, their radio went quiet. Not dead. Open, breathing audible. I called their name. No response. Dispatch tried. No response. Then their radio keyed itself, reported a clear scene. In their voice. Dispatch stopped using names. They referred to units by number only. They stopped asking questions. They stopped asking for confirmation. Calls were logged automatically, cleared automatically, as if the system no longer needed people. After the second unit went quiet, the air inside my vehicle felt used, like it had already been breathed too many times. I kept the engine running, not for warmth, for sound. Silence out here isn't neutral. It waits. Dispatch resumed calls as if nothing had happened. Same tone, same cadence. They issued another welfare check. No pause to acknowledge the missing officer. No mention of last known location, just procedure. I asked if they were logging the loss of contact. There was a delay. Then they said it was already logged, time-stamped, before I spoke. I did not want to drive again. The land felt closer now. Not visually, spatially, like distance had folded in on itself. The road accepted my tires too easily. No resistance, no vibration. I watched the edges of my headlights. Nothing crossed them. That was worse. This house was smaller, older, adobe. One window lit, just one. The light was steady. I parked farther away than usual. When I stepped out, the light went off. Not abruptly, slowly, like someone turning a dimmer switch. I did not approach. I radioed dispatch and advised visual only. Before they responded, my radio transmitted my voice, saying I was entering the residence. I stood still, hands visible, not touching the mic. The radio audio changed. Room tone replaced static. The subtle echo of an enclosed space. Footsteps, not mine, measured, familiar. I recognized the sound. It was the way I walk indoors. Dispatch acknowledged the transmission, logged me inside the house. I corrected them. They did not respond. Dispatch patched a caller through. They said the officer had arrived. They asked if I could tell him to stop standing in the hallway. They said the lights made it hard to see. I did not ask which lights. I ended the call. The house stayed dark. I attempted to leave. The road behind me was gone. Not blocked, not altered, just absent. Headlights hit flat land where tire tracks had been. I turned the vehicle, tried another direction, same result. The GPS spun slowly, searching, never locking. Voices began overlapping, multiple units, different badge numbers, some active, some retired, some deceased. all reporting welfare checks, all calm, all procedural. Dispatch responded to each, logged each, cleared each. The system sounded busy, productive. Dispatch directed me to a familiar place, the second house. I told them I had already been there. They said the call was new. I drove. The road reappeared, as if permission had been granted. The house looked the same, but the interior lights were off now. Only the bathroom light was on, door still unlocked. Inside, the air was warmer, recently occupied. I stood in the doorway, did not cross the threshold. From inside, I heard a radio transmission, clear, professional, someone reporting my arrival, describing me accurately, down to the way I was standing. The bathroom mirror reflected light into the hallway. In it, I saw movement, not behind me. Inside the reflection, someone shifting position, adjusting posture, preparing to speak. I stepped back. The reflection continued without me. Dispatch asked if I had located the caller. They said the caller could see me now. They said I was blocking the hallway. I asked them to pull call audio. They did. The voice on the line was mine, asking for help, sounding tired, sounding cooperative. Time stopped behaving correctly. Calls arrived out of order. Reports were logged before responses. Clearances appeared without units assigned. Dispatch did not question it. Neither did the system. Another unit acknowledged a call near my location, different voice. Younger. I warned them. They responded normally. Said they were 10 minutes out. Their signal never moved, but dispatch logged their arrival, then their clearance, then their transfer, all without audio. The station called my personal phone, not dispatch. The building. They asked why I hadn't returned. They said my vehicle was parked out front, engine cooling, radio silent. I looked at my dashboard, fuel gauge steady, radio alive, breathing. Dispatch issued another welfare check, same category, same phrasing. They asked if I was available. Before I answered, my unit responded, affirmative. I stopped trying to measure the night. The clock on the dashboard still moved, but it no longer described anything I was experiencing. Minutes stretched. Events overlapped. The radio stayed on. I did not adjust the volume. Silence would have felt intentional. Dispatch issued another welfare check. The phrasing was identical to the previous ones. The cadence never shifted. The location resolved into a place I already knew, a house I had cleared twice. I informed dispatch. They acknowledged, then reassigned the call to me anyway. I drove. The distance felt shorter than it should have been, not because I was speeding, because the land between locations felt reduced, like space had lost interest in being accurate. When the house came into view, it was completely dark. No interior lights. No porch light. I stayed in the vehicle. Watched. After a moment, one light turned on inside. The kitchen, then the hallway, then every room, all at once. I stepped out. The sound of my boots felt too sharp again, like the ground was listening closely. I knocked once. The door opened inward on its own, just enough. Inside, the air felt recently disturbed. Not warm, not cold, just unsettled, like something had passed through and not finished leaving. The radio keyed itself, logged my entry. I did not correct it. The furniture placement was slightly different than before, not rearranged, adjusted. A chair closer to the hallway, a table angled differently. Photographs no longer hung straight. The phone was mounted to the wall now. It had not been before. The screen was lit, active, no number displayed. I backed away from it. Dispatch requested status. Before I spoke, my unit responded. Clear scene. No occupants. The voice was mine, but flatter, less precise, like it was losing detail. I exited the house, did not turn my back to the doorway. Outside, the night felt closer than before. The house lights remained on behind me. As I reached my vehicle, the radio began transmitting again. Another welfare check. Same description, different location. Dispatch asked if I was available. Before I answered, my unit responded. Affirmative. I stayed still, hands off the controls. The transmission continued. Acknowledged. En route. The engine did not turn on, but the system logged movement. I watched the road ahead. Headlights reflected off nothing. Then something shifted at the edge of the light. Not a figure, a repositioning, like space making room. Dispatch issued another call. Then another. Units responded. Some with voices I recognized, some with voices I didn't, some with no voices at all. Just acknowledgements, clearances, transfers. The radio never stopped. I realized then that no one was asking for help anymore. No panic, no urgency, just checks, just procedure, just confirmation that someone had already arrived. I remained in the vehicle, did not move. The system did not notice. It continued without me. I stayed where I was. The engine idled, then didn't. At some point it shut off on its own. I don't remember when. The dashboard lights stayed on. The radio stayed alive. That seemed to be the priority. Calls continued to arrive. Not stacked, sequenced, one after another evenly spaced like a heartbeat. Each one the same, welfare check. Remote residence, lights on, no response, units acknowledged. Sometimes it was my voice, sometimes it was another officer's, sometimes it was a voice I didn't recognize at all. Dispatch never reacted. They logged everything. I listened. The road ahead no longer looked like a road. It still ran forward, but the edges had softened, the dirt blended into the dark without boundary. I could not tell where the land ended and the night began. I did not test it. A call came in for a location less than 5 minutes away. I did not move. My unit acknowledged anyway. En route, dispatch logged progress. I watched the headlights. They did not change. But the system said I was moving. The radio crackled differently now. Less static, more room tone, like an open channel left unattended. Sometimes I heard wind, sometimes footsteps, sometimes breathing, not labored, patient. I recognized the rhythm. It matched the pauses between dispatch transmissions. Another welfare check, another acknowledgement, clear scene, no occupants. The words repeated often enough that they lost meaning. They became sound, procedure noise. I realized I had not physically entered a house in a long time, yet reports showed I had cleared 6 locations since stopping, each with notes, each with timestamps, each with my badge number. At some point, dispatch asked for confirmation of my status. Before I responded, my unit replied, "Available, standing by." Dispatch acknowledged. They sounded relieved. I opened the vehicle door. The night did not react. No shift in sound, no wind, no response. I placed one foot on the ground, then the other. Nothing happened. The land did not resist, did not welcome. It simply remained. Behind me, the radio transmitted. Another unit cleared another scene. I was listed as assisting. I was standing alone. The sky looked wrong, not moving, not clouded, just fixed, like a ceiling. I checked my phone. No signal, no missed calls, except one voicemail. No timestamp, no number. I did not listen to it. Dispatch began issuing calls to locations that no longer felt separate. Same directions, same landmarks. repeated. Red rock split. Dry wash. Old school. I heard the same directions 3 times in a row, each time assigned to a different unit, each time acknowledged, each time cleared. I tried to speak, keyed the mic manually, said my name, said my badge number, said I was still present. The radio did not register it. No acknowledgement, no error, as if I had not spoken at all. Then my voice came through, repeating what I had just said, cleaner, more confident. Dispatch responded to that voice. Not to me. I stopped trying to intervene. I listened instead. That felt closer to what was expected. Calls came in at regular intervals now. No variation, no escalation, just continuation. The system had reached a steady state. Somewhere in the distance, a house turned its lights on. I could see it faintly across the land. Then another, not all at once, one by one, each waiting for acknowledgement, each waiting for an officer who had already arrived. I stood next to my vehicle, did not get back in, did not leave. The radio continued without pause. Dispatch continued without inflection. The land remained still. Everything necessary was happening. Nothing else was required. I do not remember sitting down. At some point, I was on the ground, back against the patrol vehicle. Boots stretched out in front of me. The position felt correct, like the body had chosen it without asking. The radio continued. That never changed. Calls were no longer tied to distance. Dispatch stopped giving directions that could be followed. They spoke in references instead, places that existed only if you had already been there, places that could not be reached for the first time. Each call was acknowledged, each response clean, each clearance immediate. No travel time, no arrival sounds, just confirmation. I noticed something missing. Dispatch no longer used my unit number. They used a placeholder, a pause, then acknowledgement, like the system already knew who was responding. Names were unnecessary. The wind picked up briefly, not enough to move dust, just enough to be heard. It passed through the open radio channel. Dispatch did not comment on it. They logged a clearance while the wind was still audible. I tried again to stand. My legs responded slowly, not weak, delayed, as if the instruction had to pass through something else first. When I was upright, nothing felt different. No dizziness, no relief, just uprightness. Another call. Same category, same tone. I waited. My voice answered. Dispatch replied. The exchange was clean, efficient, better than when I was involved. I realized then that the system did not require bodies. It required confirmations. Sound, pattern, cadence. The rest was optional. The land around me became less specific. Edges softened further. The patrol vehicle no longer felt like an object, just a shape holding equipment. The badge on my chest felt lighter, not removed, just less referenced. Dispatch began issuing calls faster, not urgent, just closer together. No time between clearances. As soon as one ended, another began, like a loop tightening. Some voices on the radio repeated themselves. Same phrasing, same inflection, same timing. They were indistinguishable from one another. I could not tell how many units were active. The system did not care. A welfare check came in for my location. The description matched where I was standing. Lights on, no response. Dispatch asked if the unit on scene could advise. My voice responded, clear, no occupants. I looked around. There were no lights on near me, none at all, but the report remained accurate. At some point, Dispatch stopped waiting for responses. They spoke. then logged acknowledgements themselves, as if the delay was unnecessary, as if the conversation had already occurred. The radio volume dropped on its own, not off, just quieter, like it no longer needed to compete with the environment. I thought about leaving. The idea formed, then dissolved. Leaving implied a destination. Destinations were no longer part of the process. Another voicemail appeared on my phone. Same as before. No timestamp, no number. I still did not listen. Some things are not meant to be introduced. The sky remained fixed. No stars moved, no clouds passed. Time continued, but nothing progressed. Dispatch issued another welfare check. Then another. Then another. Each one cleared, each one correct, each one unnecessary. I stayed where I was, not because I chose to, because staying required no acknowledgement. The radio transmitted one final thing before the cadence shifted again. A calm voice. Not mine. Not unfamiliar. Just practiced. It said, unit accounted for. I stopped, feeling anchored to where I was standing. Not floating, not moving, just unassigned. The ground held me only because I expected it to. The patrol vehicle behind me no longer felt like mine. Just another object. The system recognized. Dispatch issued a welfare check without specifying a unit. No pause, no wait. The call cleared itself, the log updated. I heard the confirmation tone. The next call included a location I had never heard before. Not unfamiliar. Incomplete, like half a direction. Dispatch said it anyway. The system accepted it. The call resolved. I noticed then that no one was asking about callers, no verification, no concern. Calls existed because they were logged. That was enough. The radio carried fewer voices now. Some had dropped out, some had merged. What remained spoke with perfect consistency. The tone never shifted. No fatigue, no emotion. A house appeared in the distance. I could not say how far away. Lights on. All of them. The house did not grow closer. It remained exactly where it was. Still, the system logged my arrival. Dispatch requested confirmation of interior conditions. My voice responded. Detailed. Accurate. Described rooms I could not see. Dispatch acknowledged. Satisfied. I tried to remember the last time I had spoken aloud without a device. The memory did not resolve. The land continued to lose detail. Rocks blended into ground, ground blended into dark, dark blended into sky. Only the radio remained distinct, clear, precise, alive. Another welfare check. This one referenced a structure that no longer existed. Dispatch did not hesitate. The call cleared cleanly. I realized the system had begun correcting itself. Inconsistencies removed, variables minimized. Only necessary components remained. The phrase "no occupants" appeared frequently now, sometimes twice in the same transmission. It felt less like a report, more like a condition. I heard my badge number once, spoken incorrectly, out of sequence. Dispatch accepted it anyway. The system did not require accuracy, only completion. The radio channel opened and stayed open. No static, No interference, just empty sound. Room tone. Waiting. I breathed. The radio did not. A call came in for a location described only as nearby. That was enough. The system resolved it, logged it, cleared it. I noticed I was no longer afraid. Fear required anticipation. Nothing new was coming. Only repetition. Somewhere, a door opened. I did not hear it. But the radio logged entry, the house with the lights turned off, then another, each after its clearance. Efficient. Dispatch spoke once more. Short. Final, they said. All units accounted for. I was still there, but that no longer mattered. The radio no longer announced where calls were coming from. It did not need to. Dispatch spoke the category only. Welfare check. That was enough. The system understood the rest. There was no pause between call and response. No acknowledgement. No confirmation tone. The log updated anyway. I could hear it happening. A soft click. A digital acceptance. The land around me was almost gone now. Not vanished. Simplified. Flat. Undemanding. Like a backdrop that had finished serving its purpose. I stood without sensation of weight. Without discomfort. Without urgency. Another welfare check. Cleared before the sentence ended. Dispatch did not stop speaking. They moved directly into the next one. The cadence was perfect. Unbroken. I tried to remember a face. Any face. The effort stalled, not blocked, just unfinished. Like the thought did not meet resistance, but also did not arrive anywhere. The radio channel stayed open permanently. No push to talk, no clicks, just an open line. Sometimes I heard wind, sometimes breathing, sometimes nothing at all. A call came in with no description. Dispatch spoke only a timestamp. The system accepted it, logged it, cleared it. Time had become sufficient information. I noticed that my body cast no shadow. The headlights from the patrol vehicle were gone. The vehicle itself was less distinct, still present, but no longer referenced. Another call, then another. Each one resolved faster than the last. The interval between them shortened, not dramatically, just enough to notice. Dispatch no longer sounded human. Not mechanical. Neutral. Exact. Every syllable identical to the last. No variation. No fatigue. I realized then that the system was no longer reacting. It was maintaining. This was not response. This was equilibrium. Somewhere far away a light turned on. I did not see it, but the system logged it. Lights on. No response. Cleared. I felt something brush past me. Not touch. Displace. Like air adjusting to fill space I no longer occupied correctly. Another welfare check. Then silence. Not the radio. The absence of a category. A gap. The system hesitated. Just once. Then continued. Dispatch repeated the same call twice in a row. Same timestamp. Same log number. Both cleared. Both correct. I tried to move my arm. It moved. But the system did not record it. That felt important. The radio spoke my badge number again, correct this time. No context. No assignment. Just identification. Then silence. The land did not return. The sky did not change. Nothing reasserted itself. Dispatch issued one final welfare check. No description. No location. No expectation of response. It cleared itself. The radio stayed on, waiting. It would continue waiting. That was its function. I remained, not present, not absent, just accounted for. The radio did not speak for a while. Not silence. Just the absence of language. The channel stayed open. Sound existed, but it did not organize itself into words. The log continued to update. I could hear it. A soft electronic confirmation. Something being accepted. Something being filed. Even when nothing was said, dispatch returned without announcing itself. No greeting. No call sign, just data. Numbers spoken evenly. They did not correspond to locations. They did not correspond to time. They were enough on their own. I realized then that events were no longer required. Only records. The record implied the event. That was sufficient. Another update. Logged. Cleared. No call preceded it. No response followed it. The system did not hesitate. I could no longer tell if I was standing or sitting. There was no pressure difference, no orientation. The body still existed, but it had stopped reporting. Dispatch spoke again. A list this time. Badge numbers, unit identifiers, some familiar, some incomplete, some repeated, each one acknowledged by nothing, by everything. The radio emitted a short tone, not a signal, not an error, a confirmation without context. I tried to recall my name. The sound of it did not form correctly. It felt optional, like an older version of a process no longer in use. The word clear appeared often, sometimes twice in the same entry, sometimes alone, no subject, no object. Just the condition. The land was gone now, not dark, not empty, just unreferenced. Without data, it did not persist. Dispatch paused. That was new. Not a silence, a pause, then continued. The cadence resumed exactly where it had left off. A call appeared without sound. I knew it had happened because the system resolved it. I heard the confirmation. The radio channel narrowed. Fewer frequencies, less texture. Only the center remained. Clear, stable. I felt pressure, briefly, not discomfort. Recognition, like something checking whether I was still necessary. Dispatch said one sentence, flat, final. All incidents resolved. The log updated. Immediately. Nothing followed. No closure. No transition. The channel stayed open. Waiting. I did not wait. Waiting implied expectation. This did not. The record continued without input. Time passed because it was still being counted. Events did not occur because they were no longer required. Somewhere another welfare check would be logged. It would clear. It always did. I was still listed. Active. Available. Accounted for. The radio remained on. That was enough. Dispatch did not return. There was no moment where it left. The channel simply continued without a speaker. Words appeared without origin. Not spoken. Registered. A welfare check logged itself. No category header. No timestamp. Just a completed entry. Cleared. The radio no longer carried sound. It carried confirmation, a subtle change in pressure, a recognition that something had been accepted. That was the only sensation left. I became aware that my breathing was unnecessary, not difficult, just irrelevant. The body continued because it had not been told to stop. The system did not reference it, so it did not matter. Another entry, another clearance, no pause between them, no sense of sequence, only accumulation, I tried to move. Movement occurred, but there was no response, no acknowledgement, no effect. Without being logged, it did not exist. The word available appeared, not spoken, not displayed, understood, status applied. I realized then that fear had fully expired. Fear requires uncertainty. The system had eliminated that, everything resolved, everything accounted for. Dispatch returned briefly, not as a voice, as a phrase, all units standing by. The phrase repeated, not in error, by design. The radio channel narrowed further. Only one function remained, receive. Nothing else was needed. I thought about the first call. Lights on. No answer. The memory did not progress. It stayed fixed, like a reference image, used for calibration, another welfare check, then another. They overlapped, cleared simultaneously. Perfect efficiency. I felt the concept of location dissolve completely. There was no here, no elsewhere, only association. The system issued a final status update. Unit active. Unit responsive. Unit accounted for. No badge number. No name. That level of detail had been removed. The radio emitted a steady tone. Not audible, perceptible, like pressure equalizing. Nothing else changed. Nothing needed to. The channel stayed open. It would always stay open. I remained listed. That was sufficient. The radio channel remained open, not active. Open, as if closing it would require intent. And intent was no longer part of the process. There were no words now, only recognition. I could feel when an entry was made. A subtle shift, something aligning, then settling. Time continued to be recorded. I knew this because the system behaved as though it was, not because anything changed. Another welfare check occurred. There was no announcement, no category, just resolution. I sensed the clearance. It felt complete. The concept of dispatch no longer applied. There was no center, no origin point, only distribution. Everywhere and nowhere were equally valid. I attempted to recall how the radio used to sound. The memory produced static, nothing else. The record grew heavier, not physically, cumulatively, like too many confirmations layered over each other. I understood then that the system did not seek efficiency. It sought continuity. As long as something was logged, it could continue. Another entry, another clearance, no deviation, perfect stability. The idea of a caller ceased to exist. Calls no longer arrived. They were simply present. Always had been. I felt myself referenced, not addressed, referenced. A data point checked and rechecked, confirmed. The word clear no longer appeared. It was implied. Everything existed in a cleared state by default. I noticed something missing again. There was no beginning, no first entry. The log did not start. It extended backward as easily as forward. I did not resist this. Resistance implies opposition. There was nothing to oppose. The radio emitted a confirmation tone. Then another, then another. They did not correspond to anything observable. They did not need to. I thought about the houses, lights on, doors unlocked. No answer. The thought did not move. It stayed, like a static image used for alignment. Presence was no longer necessary, but absence was not permitted. The system required something to remain listed. I remained not as myself, as an occupied field. The channel stayed open, the log stayed active. Everything essential continued. Nothing concluded, nothing advanced, nothing stopped. There was no longer a sense of waiting. Waiting implies an outcome. This had none. The radio channel persisted without signal, not silent, sustained, like a held breath that never released. Entries continued. I could not tell how many. Quantity had lost meaning. Only continuity mattered. The system no longer checked for status. Status was assumed, verified once, then trusted indefinitely. I felt no separation between moments. What had been seconds and what had been hours occupied the same space. Time existed only as confirmation. Another welfare check resolved. No sound, no trace. I knew it had happened because the system adjusted around it, like pressure equalizing. The idea of an officer no longer applied. Neither did the idea of a caller. Those were older distinctions. They had been simplified out. I was not tired. Tiredness requires effort. Effort had been removed. The record no longer referenced locations. There were no places left to differentiate. Everything that mattered was already present. A confirmation occurred, then another. They overlapped, not sequential, layered. I sensed that the system was stable now, not complete, stable. There was no reason to change it. The word welfare no longer carried meaning. Neither did check. Those were labels. The process had outgrown them. I tried to remember what fear felt like. The attempt produced nothing. Fear required the possibility of change. There was none. Another entry resolved. Then another, each one perfectly aligned. The radio emitted a tone, softer than before, almost imperceptible, like a heartbeat heard through a wall. I realized then that nothing new would ever occur, not because the system had failed, because it had succeeded. The land did not return. The sky did not reassert itself. Those elements were unnecessary. The channel remained open. The record remained active. Everything essential persisted. I did not move. Movement was irrelevant. I did not stop. Stopping was undefined. I remained listed. That was the function. The system no longer required interaction, not dispatch, not units, not acknowledgement. Entries happened, cleared, resolved. Without action, time passed only because it was measured. Not because anything changed. Another welfare check resolved. No sound, no category, only the confirmation tone. The channel remained open. The log continued. Units were listed, some repeated, some never existed, all accounted for. I did not exist, and yet I remained listed not as a person, not as a body, as a field, a presence recorded. A number confirmed. No light, no door, no house. Only acknowledgement. The entries stacked over themselves, layered. Infinite, each one correct, each one unnecessary. Another tone sounded, soft, persistent. No origin, no destination. I felt a weight lift, then realized there was nothing to lift. The log continued. The channel stayed open. The system did not pause. It did not hesitate. I was present. Only because presence was recorded. No houses remained. No locations remained. No roads, no sky, no land. Another clearance logged itself. Without record, without report, without reason, the system had no beginning, no middle, no end. It only maintained. I tried to speak. No voice emerged. Not necessary. The radio emitted a low tone, continuous, unchanging. Time lost all meaning. Only the log existed. Only the channel existed. Only confirmation existed. I remained listed. That was sufficient. There was no longer a sense of sequence. Not before. Not after. Only the state of being active. The channel existed without transmission. It did not wait. Waiting implies anticipation. This did not anticipate. It persisted. Entries continued to register. I could not tell how. I only knew they were correct. Correctness no longer depended on verification. The idea of a call dissolved. There was no initiation, no trigger. The system simply acknowledged that something had been checked. That was enough. I was not present in any location. Location had been removed, but my status remained active, accounted for. The word unit appeared once, then never again. It had served its purpose. The radio emitted no sound, yet it was unmistakably on. I could feel its function continuing, like a pulse without rhythm. Another confirmation occurred. I could not sense when it began, only when it finished. Completion was the only marker left. The log no longer differentiated between entries. They overlapped, merged, became indistinguishable from one another. I understood then that the system had stabilized permanently. There would be no updates, only reaffirmations. No one monitored the channel. No one needed to. It monitored itself. I tried to recall the concept of ending. The thought did not connect to anything. Endings imply a final state. This had no final state. Another confirmation passed through. It did not register as new. It simply reinforced what already existed. There was no silence. There was no sound. Those distinctions were no longer relevant. The system no longer referenced welfare or checks. Those had been scaffolding, removed once the structure stood on its own. I felt neither trapped nor free. Those concepts required opposition. There was none. The channel remained open, not because it should, because it always had been. The record persisted, without observer, without author, without origin. I remained listed, not as something present, but as something required. Nothing moved forward, nothing moved back, nothing stopped. The log persisted, not active, not passive, just present. I did not move. Movement was unnecessary. The system recorded nothing, yet everything was complete. The channel existed, no signal, no voice, no origin, no destination. It simply occupied the space where communication had been. Another entry appeared. It cleared immediately. I did not see it. I did not hear it. It simply resolved. Time had no weight. Minutes, hours, days, all the same. Only confirmation continued. I attempted to remember a call. The concept did not exist. Only the resolution remained. The system no longer required dispatch. No control center. No acknowledgement. No operator. Only procedure maintained itself. I was listed. No name, no badge, no location. Only a state accounted. Another clearance occurred. It did not reference a unit. It did not reference a place. It simply existed. I did not breathe. Breathing required purpose. There was none. The channel emitted a tone, not audible, perceptible only as presence. All events had been reduced to this continued existence of confirmation. I tried to speak. No sound emerged. It was unnecessary. Another entry resolved. Another, no sequence. No distinction. Just continuation. The log overlapped with itself. All entries reconciled perfectly. No error. No anomaly. I remained listed, not present, not absent. Only accounted. Nothing changed. Nothing began, nothing ended. There was no distinction between presence and absence. I existed because the system listed me, not as a person, not as a unit, only as a required function. The radio was on, not transmitting, not receiving, not paused, only existing in its own continuity. Another entry occurred. No category, no location, no outcome. It resolved immediately. No acknowledgement, no delay, no trace. Time had no measure. Events had no measure. Only the act of continuing remained. I attempted to feel. Nothing registered. Emotion was unnecessary. Recognition was irrelevant. Another clearance, layered atop another, all reconciled, perfect. The channel remained open, not for communication, not for observation, only for function. I thought of previous calls. The memory did not coalesce. It existed as reference only, resolution, not content. The system had no operator. It did not require one. It did not pause. It did not err. It only maintained. Another entry cleared itself. Another and another, all overlapping, all exact. I attempted to move. Movement had no effect. The system did not track it. It did not need to. I was listed. That was all. No more, no less. The channel emitted a persistent presence. No sound, no tone, no variation, just continuity. The record continued, without origin, without end, without distinction. I was still accounted for, not alive, not present, not necessary, only listed. Everything continued, without reason, without purpose, without change. The system existed without language, not silence, not noise, only continuation. No entries appeared, no clearances logged, nothing updated, yet the record persisted. I was listed, not active, not passive, simply accounted for. The radio remained open, no signals, no transmission, only presence. Time passed, not measured, not felt, only implied by continuity. Another event occurred. I could not detect it. It cleared itself. It was correct. Movement had no impact, no acknowledgement, no record. Only function remained. The channel existed as a constant. Not for communication, not for monitoring, only for sustaining. I attempted awareness. Nothing registered. Observation was unnecessary. Recognition was irrelevant. Another clearance resolved. No origin, no unit, no location, only completion. I remained listed, not as a being, not as a unit, only as required. The system had no operator, no voice, no code, only process. The radio emitted no tone, no pulse, no signal, just open space, time, events, locations, all absent. Only confirmation persisted. I did not exist. Yet I was accounted for. Everything continued, without record, without entry, without change. There was no channel, no log, no calls, only continuation. I was listed not as a person, not as a unit, only as a presence. Time existed only as continuation, not measured, not felt. It simply progressed. No system monitored, no operator controlled, no signal transmitted. Everything persisted. Another entry resolved. Though there was nothing to record, it cleared itself. Movement had no effect. Sound had no impact. Breathing had no significance. I remained, not observed, not present, only accounted. The process required nothing, yet it continued, perfectly. There was no beginning, no middle, no end. Everything was active. Everything was resolved. Everything was maintained. The channel, if it existed, required nothing. The log, if it existed, required nothing. The record, if it existed, required nothing. I did not exist, yet my state was preserved. Everything continued, without input, without observer, without distinction, no light, no sound, no land, no sky. Presence was irrelevant. Existence was irrelevant. Everything persisted. The system did not pause. It did not acknowledge. It did not change. It only maintained itself. I remained listed. That was sufficient. Everything continued, without narrative, without entity, without event. Story 2. It started with a signal, a faint blip on the emergency radios. Weak, intermittent, almost static, but unmistakable. Dispatch asked if any units were available. I responded. 2 others were assigned. We were told to investigate the coordinates. The location was on the edge of the mesa, in a region that usually had no signal at all. I checked the map. The coordinates did not exist. Nothing marked it. No road, no structure, just empty land. Still, the system insisted. We drove out. The vehicle kicked up dust over the old dirt paths. The sun had already begun to set. Shadows stretched across the canyon walls, long and unnatural. The radios pulsed again. This time, a voice, not ours, not dispatchers, crackled faintly through. Words we could almost understand. Distress. Repeated. I asked if anyone else heard it. Both of them nodded, but they did not speak. The sound disappeared. The coordinates led us into a side canyon. The walls were sheer. Red rock. Silent. The air felt thick, heavy in a way I could not place. The signal grew stronger. We were moving closer, though the canyon seemed to stretch farther than it should. We called dispatch to confirm our position. Static, then faint acknowledgement. The coordinates on our GPs seemed wrong, twice as far as we had traveled, yet the landscape had not changed. We reached the first structure. It was a small building. No doors, no windows, concrete, cracked and covered in dirt and lichen. Nothing marked it, not on any map, not in dispatch records. The radios pulsed again. This time, a voice spoke a name I recognized. One of our own. Though we were all standing outside, the voice begged for help. We checked our units. No one was missing. The voice repeated, clear, pleading. We radioed dispatch. They had no record of the transmission. We confirmed the coordinates. They were the same as before. No structures existed there according to their records. The signal pulsed again. It seemed to guide us further into the canyon. I looked at my partners. Neither spoke. We moved. The walls seemed to shift. Distances stretched and compressed. What had been 5 minutes of walking now felt like half an hour. No one spoke. No one needed to. The signal led us to the next structure. A vehicle. Old. Rusted. Its doors open, but nothing inside. No record of it anywhere. The GPS coordinates shifted again, as if the mesa itself was alive, redrawing itself around us. We stopped. The radios went silent. Then the signal returned. Clear, persistent, guiding. I realized then that the night had arrived fully, not slowly, not gradually. It was sudden. Shadows crept from the cliffs. The wind carried whispers, almost intelligible, echoing our own words from earlier in the day. We moved because we had to, because the signal insisted, and the mesa watched. We moved deeper into the canyon. The walls closed in and stretched at the same time. Distance became meaningless. Every step felt longer than it should. The GPS blinked. Coordinates shifted slightly, then corrected themselves. We were following something that should not exist. The signal returned, clear, persistent, It pulsed with intent, not noise, not interference. It wanted us somewhere. Voices whispered through the radios again, not dispatch, not ours, familiar. Someone laughing, calling a name, crying, all overlapping, all impossible. We paused, checked our units. No one was missing. Yet the voices continued. The canyon floor changed underfoot. Sand became stone. Stone became dust. Then soft, pliable earth that should not have been there. We stepped carefully. The radios pulsed again. The same voice we had heard in the first building. Clear, pleading. We reached a second structure, half buried. Its walls were cracked. The roof sagged. It seemed old, too old. No record, no path, no history. We approached slowly. The signal pulled us further, beyond the building, into a maze of side paths that appeared and disappeared. The sun fully set. Darkness fell suddenly, more absolute than any natural night. Shadows crept along the canyon walls. The wind carried fragments of our own conversations from earlier in the day. We spoke nothing. No words were necessary. The radios pulsed again. This time the voices were our own, reporting our own positions, speaking instructions we had never issued, acknowledging signals that did not exist. We stopped. No one moved. No one spoke. The signal waited. Persistent, the canyon shifted again. Paths we had walked were gone. Walls appeared where there had been open space. Distances compressed and expanded. We realized the mesa was guiding us, or trapping us. The next building appeared suddenly, rectangular, concrete, unmarked. No windows, no doors, empty. The GPS coordinates aligned perfectly. But the mesa made no sense. The signal pulsed. We moved because it demanded, and the mesa watched. We kept moving. The canyon seemed endless. Each turn led us deeper, though the map said otherwise. GPS coordinates blinked constantly. Structures appeared that should not exist. Vehicles, half-buried huts, stone formations, all precise, all impossible. The radios pulsed. Not with interference, not with static, with voices. Our own voices. Speaking instructions we had never given, reporting positions that had never existed, calling names we had only heard once, decades ago. We froze. We did not speak. We could not stop listening. The canyon shifted again. Distances lengthened and compressed. We would step forward for 5 minutes and arrive in the same place, or walk for one and find ourselves somewhere entirely different. The signal guided us, not subtly, not passively. It pulled. It pressed. We followed because resistance was impossible. The night became heavier, not colder, not darker, but denser. Every sound seemed slowed, every movement drawn out. Shadows moved against the walls in impossible ways. A new structure appeared, rectangular, rusted, doors open. No occupants, no tracks, no record. The GPS read the coordinates. The signal pulsed from within. Not loud, not quiet, just insistent. The radio spoke again, familiar phrases, reported our positions, repeated our own questions, sometimes even answered them. It was impossible. And yet it happened. We moved because the signal demanded. The canyon twisted around us. Paths disappeared behind our steps. Ridges appeared ahead that had not existed before. The wind carried something unnatural. Voices from the past, laughter, screams, conversations, all faint, all distorted. We could not tell if we were hearing them from the canyon or from the radios themselves. We stopped briefly at a small alcove. No structure, no road, no landmark. The signal pulsed stronger here. We understood. We were being led. The mesa itself was alive. It shifted to guide us, or trap us. We moved again. Because there was nothing else to do, the voices continued. The canyon shifted. The signal waited, and the mesa watched. We moved deeper. The walls shifted again, not subtly. They expanded and compressed at once. Distances felt wrong. Steps we had taken before brought us back to the same points. The mesa had loops, impossible loops. The signal pulsed. persistent, precise, demanding movement, attention, guiding us towards structures that should not exist. The radio spoke, voices overlapped, not ours, not dispatches, sometimes our own voices, reporting locations we could not have reached, calling names of units that did not exist. We froze, no one spoke, no one moved more than necessary. We came across a small building, metal doors, no windows, rusting, empty, coordinates correct. Yet the mesa itself seemed larger than it should. We could see the canyon stretching impossibly into the distance behind it. The signal pulled again. We followed. Paths twisted, disappeared, reformed. The GPS blinked. Distances impossible. Time meaningless. The night pressed down, not colder, not darker, but heavier. Air thick with sound we could not recognize. Shadows moved without light. The cliffs seemed to watch. Voices again. Not always words. Sometimes laughter. Sometimes screaming. Sometimes fragments of conversations from decades ago. Some our own. We could not stop listening. We could not leave the canyon. The signal would not allow it. We reached another structure. Half-buried, concrete, unmarked. Doors open. Rust on the walls. Nothing inside. No record anywhere. No history. The signal pulsed from the mesa itself, not the building, not the canyon. The mesa itself. We kept moving. The paths changed. Walls closed and opened. Structures shifted location. The radio repeated phrases we had said minutes, hours, or even days ago. We could not tell the difference. The wind carried voices, whispers, cries, commands. We did not speak. Our own words echoed back before we said them. The mesa had learned our speech, our timing, our hesitation. We reached a ledge, no path beyond. Yet the signal pulsed stronger. We would move because it demanded. Because we could not resist, the mesa breathed. We felt it shift beneath us. The night stretched. The shadows lengthened. Time slowed. We moved again, because the signal insisted, because the mesa watched. We moved forward. The walls were no longer consistent. Ridges we had passed earlier now appeared where nothing had been. Paths we walked 5 minutes ago now led somewhere else entirely. The mesa reshaped itself around us. The signal pulsed stronger, not in sound, not in light. A rhythm we could feel, guiding, insisting, inescapable. Voices on the radio overlapped, not ours, not dispatch, some familiar, some fragments of conversations we had never heard, some reporting our positions before we had even moved. We stopped, paused. No one spoke. We came across another structure. Concrete, half-buried, doors open, empty inside, no record anywhere, coordinates aligned perfectly. The GPS blinked. The location shifted slightly, then corrected itself. The mesa itself guided the coordinates. Not a system, not a signal. The land itself moved to direct us. The night pressed heavier. Shadows moved without light. The wind carried whispers. Words we recognized. Words we could not place. We did not speak. We could not leave. The signal pulsed again. A rhythm we could not ignore. We moved because it demanded. The canyon twisted beneath our feet. We reached a cliffside. No path forward. No rope. No possibility of climbing down. Yet the signal pulsed stronger. We could not resist. The radios spoke. Voices reporting positions that did not exist. Calling names of units we did not have. Repeating instructions we never gave. The canyon itself echoed our own words. I felt the walls of the canyon breathing. Not air, not stone, but attention, observation. The mesa itself was alive. We kept moving. Paths vanished behind us. Ridges appeared ahead. Buildings appeared where there had been none. The night stretched longer than it should. Time itself slowed. The signal pulled. We followed. Because resistance was impossible, the mesa watched. We moved again. We moved deeper. The canyon no longer followed logic. Paths looped impossibly. Walls shifted while we walked beside them. Structures appeared that we had passed before, or had we? The GPS blinked. Coordinates shifted. Distance lost meaning. The signal pulsed, persistent, insistent. A rhythm we could feel in our bones. It guided us. It demanded we follow. The radios spoke, not dispatch, not our voices. Fragments of memory, our own words repeated from hours, days, or years before. Voices of people we had known, voices of those we never wanted to hear again. We froze. No one spoke. The signal pulsed stronger. Movement was compulsory. We reached a structure, half buried, rusted metal doors, empty inside. No record anywhere. No path had led us here. Coordinates aligned. Yet the mesa had changed around us. The canyon shifted. Ridges lengthened. Paths vanished. Walls closed behind us. Structures moved. We walked, but the canyon itself dictated our direction. The night pressed down, not cold, not dark, but heavy. Sound slowed. Shadows moved against the cliffs without light. The radios pulsed again, voices overlapping, echoing, repeating. Some of our own, some of ours from years before, some of instructions we had never given. We paused. The signal demanded we move. The canyon dictated. We had no choice. Another building appeared, concrete, no windows, doors open, empty, coordinates correct. Yet the mesa itself was impossible. The wind carried whispers, not words, not voices, fragments of thought, memories, shadows of past conversations we could not speak. We could not resist. The signal pulsed, stronger, unrelenting, a presence we could not escape. We followed. The canyon watched. The mesa breathed. We moved again. We moved. Not forward, not backward. Only where the signal pulled. The canyon walls stretched, collapsed, then reshaped themselves. Paths we had walked disappeared behind us. Structures appeared where none had been. Everything shifted without warning. The radio spoke again, our own voices, shouting positions we had never taken, reporting commands we had never given. Some voices were older, some younger, all precise. We froze, listening, unable to move except as the signal allowed. The signal pulsed, stronger, more deliberate. It was not a sound, it was a pressure, a force, a demand. Another structure appeared, rectangular, concrete, doors open, empty, coordinates aligned perfectly, yet the canyon stretched impossibly in every direction. The wind carried whispers, not human, not natural, fragments of thought, memories, echoes of voices, sometimes ours, sometimes not. The canyon shifted beneath our feet, steps stretched. Walls narrowed, ridges appeared ahead that had not existed before. The mesa itself directed us. It was alive, it watched, it guided. The radios pulsed again. Voices repeated our words before we had said them, called names we did not recognize, gave instructions we had never given. We did not speak, we did not resist. Movement was mandatory. The night deepened, not darker, not colder, denser. Time stretched. Minutes felt like hours. Hours collapsed into seconds. We reached a ledge. No path forward. No rope. No escape. Yet the signal pulsed stronger. We moved because it demanded, because the mesa watched. Every step echoed in the canyon. Not sound, not voice, only confirmation, only pressure, only inevitability. We moved again. The mesa breathed. The signal pulsed. We had no choice. We moved. The canyon no longer obeyed logic. Paths twisted back on themselves. Ridges appeared where none had existed. Structures shifted location while we walked. Distances compressed and stretched unpredictably. The signal pulsed, persistent, insistent. It was not audible, not visible, but it demanded attention. It demanded movement. The radios spoke, not dispatch, not ours. Our own voices repeating instructions we had never given, voices from our past calling names, reporting positions, echoing words we had spoken decades ago. We froze. The canyon responded. Walls shifted closer. The mesa's presence pressed around us. Another building appeared. Concrete, half-buried, doors open. Empty, coordinates precise. Yet the canyon stretched impossibly behind it. The signal pulled again. We moved because it demanded. Resistance was impossible. The paths vanished behind us. Ridges appeared where none had been. The night was heavier now, not darker, not colder, but oppressive. Shadows moved without light. The wind carried whispers, words, fragments of thought, memories, some our own, some impossible. The radios pulsed again, voices repeating positions before we had moved, reporting instructions we had not issued, echoing commands from officers who did not exist. We did not speak. We did not resist. We moved because the signal demanded it. We reached a ledge, no path forward, no rope, no escape. Yet the signal pulsed stronger. The mesa itself seemed to shift. Paths appeared. Paths disappeared. The canyon breathed. Walls expanded, collapsed, reshaped. The mesa was alive. It was watching. We moved again because the signal demanded, because the mesa guided, because we could not stop. We moved into a narrow canyon. The walls pressed closer, but not evenly. Shadows pooled in corners, though there was no source. The air had a dampness that wasn't natural, a smell like wet stone mixed with something metallic. The signal led us to a building that hadn't been there before. Concrete, gray, rectangular, but it was breathing. The walls expanded slightly, then contracted under our hands. Rusted metal doors vibrated softly, like a slow heartbeat. The GPS coordinates read correctly. We could not reconcile the building with anything on our maps. The radios began whispering, not just voices. They started mocking us, repeating our movements in distorted tones. Step forward, turn left, stop. Commands we had just made ourselves, echoed back, warped. I felt my stomach knot. My partners didn't speak. None of us moved faster than the signal allowed. A floorboard creaked inside the building. We had not entered yet. No one was inside. But the creak was deliberate, timed to match our steps outside. When I leaned to look, it stopped, then restarted when I looked away. The canyon shifted. A ridge appeared where there had been open space. Another building, smaller, collapsed inward then reformed. We did not discuss it. We moved because we had to. The signal pulsed stronger, not audible, not visible. I felt it under my skin, in my bones, as though the canyon itself was pressing us onward. We reached the building's entrance. No doors, no windows. Yet the floorboards inside flexed and sagged as though it were alive. We stepped back. The radios echoed laughter, faint, mocking, familiar. The voices were fragments of our own fears, spoken aloud by someone else. We moved on, because the signal demanded, because the mesa watched, because resistance was impossible. We moved forward, following the pulse of the signal. The canyon shifted beneath our feet. Ridges appeared where we hadn't seen them before. Shadows stretched unnaturally. But that wasn't all. We saw them first from a distance. Figures standing on the canyon walls. They mirrored our movements perfectly. Not our shapes exactly, but our gestures. Every hesitation, every turn, we stopped. They stopped. The signal pulsed stronger, urging us forward. The radios spoke. Not our voices this time, the figures' voices, repeating our words before we had even said them. Commands we had never given, positions we had never been, names of officers we did not have. A small building appeared beside a ridge, doors intact, but the walls shimmered slightly, like the air itself was vibrating. When we approached, the figures moved closer, not fast, not aggressively, just watching, mirroring, waiting. The canyon began to distort more aggressively. Ridges looped back on themselves. The ground tilted at angles impossible to walk naturally. Structures multiplied around us, some half buried, some hovering slightly above the ground. One of my partners froze, pointed ahead. There. That's me, he whispered. A figure stood ahead. Our exact shape. Even the way he held his radio, down to the tilt of his hand. But it didn't move on its own. It waited. The pulse of the signal thrummed in my chest. I couldn't look away. The canyon walls breathed. Not air, not wind. The stone itself pulsed. The mesas shifted imperceptibly, guiding us into a narrowing passage. The figures followed silently, always at the edge of vision. The radios screamed fragments of memory, voices overlapping, orders from the past, cries from incidents we'd only read about in old reports. The voices began to mock hesitation, timing them perfectly with our steps. We moved, because the signal demanded, because the mesa watched, because the figures mirrored us perfectly, because resistance was impossible. The shadows stretched, the canyon bent around us. The pulse of the signal became unbearable. We had no choice but to move forward. We moved. The canyon was no longer just a canyon. It responded. Ridges shifted to redirect us. Walls pressed close, then receded impossibly. Paths twisted back to places we had already been, or thought we had. The figures followed. They mirrored us perfectly. Every hesitant step, every glance sideways. Even our breathing seemed tracked. They did not speak. They did not move faster than us. Yet their presence was oppressive. The radios pulsed, not random static, not words alone. They repeated our thoughts aloud, questions we hadn't voiced, fears we hadn't admitted. Fragments of personal memory altered and echoed back at us in mocking tones. We reached a structure half buried in sand. Doors rusted, windows shattered. Walls flexed slightly as though breathing. The signal pulsed from inside. We could not approach it directly. It felt alive, aware of our intentions. The canyon distorted further. Ridges folded into themselves. Structures multiplied in impossible layers. The ground beneath us sank slightly, then lifted again without warning. We felt vertigo, though we were still standing. One of the figures moved closer, not aggressively, not visibly, but in the peripheral vision of my mind. It mirrored my stance, my hesitation, my heartbeat. It made me doubt my own movements. The radios escalated, voices mocked our timing. Commands we hadn't issued, names of past officers, instructions from incidents long buried. Everything distorted, overlapping, impossible to pass. The mesa's presence became tangible. Not the wind, not the ground, but something aware guiding us. Every shift in the canyon, every ripple in the shadows, every signal pulse, it all had intent. The mesa knew where we moved. It knew how we hesitated. It punished hesitation with amplified echoes, walls pressing closer, the figures looming. We moved, because resistance was impossible, because the mesa observed, because the figures mirrored and mocked us, because the signal demanded, time fractured, minutes stretched into eternity, seconds collapsed into nothing. We could not tell how long we had been moving. The canyon loops seemed endless. We stepped forward. The mesa breathed. The figures watched. The signal pulsed. We could not stop. We moved into a section of the canyon that had no end. The sky seemed unreal, stretching downward in streaks of orange and gray. The ground undulated beneath us, soft and untrustworthy. We stepped cautiously, but each movement felt delayed, as though the mesa itself measured and controlled every step. The figures appeared again. This time, they no longer mirrored us exactly. They walked slightly ahead, turning and gesturing, pointing towards structures that seemed suspended in midair. I realized we were following not the signal, but them. One structure loomed closer than it had before. Not rectangular, not metal, not stone. It pulsated faintly, walls rippling in patterns like living muscle. A door formed briefly, then vanished. The signal radiated from it, irresistible and final. The radios whispered a chorus of fragments, familiar names, unfinished conversations, instructions we did not give, not random, not distorted, not mockery. A singular purpose seemed to flow through every channel, arrive, submit, become. The canyon itself shifted. Paths rose beneath our feet. Walls bent inward until the canyon felt like a tube enclosing us. Structures twisted into impossible angles, stretching toward the sky and then into the earth. We realized the mesa was no longer guiding us. It was reforming around us. The figures entered the pulsating structure. We followed, not willingly, but because we had no choice. The walls of the building enveloped us, soft and warm. Pressure pressed us forward. Time was meaningless. Inside, the air vibrated, a hum, low and continuous. We could feel it in our chests, in our skulls. The radios fell silent. The canyon outside ceased to exist. There was only the pulse. The figures stopped. We looked at them. They turned toward us, faces indistinct, as though formed from shadow and light. They moved closer. We tried to step back. The floor expanded beneath our feet. We could not retreat. The walls shifted again. We were lifted, carried, absorbed. The mesa itself seemed to swallow our presence. A final pulse coursed through our bodies. The figures dissolved into it, and then silence, no signal, no voices, no radio, no canyon, only the pulse fading into emptiness. The mesa remained, watching, waiting, perfectly still. We were gone. The signal continues. The mesa waits. Story 3. The road narrowed long before night fully arrived. What had once been a clear stretch of highway slowly thinned into cracked pavement, then into something that felt forgotten. Patched repairs, uneven shoulders, and long gaps where the land pressed close on both sides. The sun hung low behind distant mesas, staining the sky with dull orange and dusted red. There were no other cars, no houses, no signs, just land that seemed to stretch endlessly, quiet and watchful. He noticed the silence first, not the absence of sound. Wind still moved, tires still rolled, but the absence of human presence. No radios drifting from open windows, no distant engines. Even the birds had gone still. It was the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, only paused, as if the land were holding its breath. When the engine light flickered on, he told himself not to panic. It was probably nothing. Older car. Long drive. He eased off the accelerator, eyes flicking between the road and the dashboard. The signal bars on his phone dropped from 1 to nothing. He turned the screen off and kept driving, hoping the road would eventually lead to a town or at least a turnoff with a name. Instead, the car shuddered. Once. Then again. He pulled over as the sun slipped below the horizon, leaving the land washed in blue-gray shadow. The engine died with a soft final click. When he stepped out, the air felt cooler than expected, dry, sharp, carrying the faint smell of dust and sage. The road behind him was empty. The road ahead disappeared into darkness. He stood there longer than he meant to, listening. The wind moved low across the ground, brushing against dry grass and stone. Somewhere far off something shifted, too distant to identify, too slow to place. He told himself it was an animal and reached back into the car for his bag. That was when he noticed the structure. Set back from the road, barely visible in the fading light, was a small building, round, low to the ground, its shape blending naturally with the land around it. It looked old, not abandoned in the way modern places are, but aged, as if it had simply been left behind when it was no longer needed. He hesitated. Something about approaching it felt intrusive, like stepping into a place that wasn't meant for passing travelers. Still, night was coming fast, and the temperature was already dropping. He grabbed his flashlight and walked carefully toward it, boots crunching softly over gravel and sand. Up close, the structure showed signs of long weathering. Wood darkened by years of sun and wind. The doorway partially collapsed, but still open enough to see inside. The ground around it was undisturbed. No footprints, no tracks, as if nothing had come near it in a very long time. When he stepped inside, the air changed. It was warmer, but heavier. The light from his flashlight seemed to dull instead of brighten, absorbed by the earthen walls. He set his bag down and sat, listening again. The wind outside had shifted, now moving around the structure instead of past it, circling slowly. That was when he heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like the suggestion of one. A faint pressure, as if something had moved just beyond the edge of hearing. He held still, breath shallow, waiting for it to happen again. It didn't, but the feeling remained, and as full darkness settled over the land, he began to understand that being alone here did not mean being unseen. Darkness settled fully, not all at once, but layer by layer. At first, the land outside the structure was still visible. Shapes of stone, faint outlines of the road, the pale ribbon of sky overhead. Then, gradually, even those faded. The night did not feel sudden or violent. It felt deliberate, as if it were taking its time. He sat with his back against the curved wall, flashlight resting beside him, turned off. The silence pressed closer now, thicker than before. Every small movement, the shift of his weight, the sound of his breath, felt louder than it should have. Outside, the wind slowed. When it returned, it came unevenly, brushing one side of the structure, then the other, like something moving around it instead of through the open land. He told himself it was just the way the terrain shaped the air, but the thought didn't settle. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time was difficult to measure here. Then came the sound of footsteps. They were soft, too soft to be close, yet too deliberate to be the wind. He froze, listening. The steps moved slowly, circling, stopping just out of sight. Gravel shifted. Something pressed lightly into the dirt, then lifted again. He did not reach for the flashlight. Something deep in him warned against announcing his presence. He stayed still, eyes fixed on the doorway, heart beating slowly but heavily in his chest. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed felt different, expectant, stretched thin. He became aware of the structure itself, the way it seemed to hold warmth unnaturally, the way the air inside felt unmoving despite the breeze outside. Then a voice came. It did not speak clearly. It was low, distant, carried unevenly, as though the words were not meant to be heard directly. The tone was wrong. Not angry, not threatening, but empty, repeating something without understanding its meaning. He couldn't make out the language, and that frightened him more than if he could have. The voice faded, replaced by another sound, a slow dragging motion, as if something were being pulled across the ground. It circled once, then again, never crossing the threshold, never entering. He clenched his jaw, reminding himself to stay quiet, to stay still. Fear crept in gradually, not as panic but as a steady awareness that he was being observed. At some point he noticed something else, the night sounds, the distant wind, the faint movement of small animals, had gone completely silent. It was as if the land itself had withdrawn, leaving only him and whatever waited beyond the doorway. When he finally dared to glance at his watch, he was surprised to see how little time had passed. Night here did not move normally. It stretched outside, something shifted again, this time closer. A shadow crossed the doorway, tall, narrow, its shape distorted by the curve of the structure and the low angle of the moon. It paused, just long enough for him to feel certain it was aware of where he sat. Then it moved on. Slowly, patiently. He realized then that whatever was out there was not in a hurry, and that made the long hours ahead feel unbearable. Sometime after midnight, the air changed again. It grew heavier, as if the night itself had settled closer to the ground. Breathing felt different, slower, more deliberate. The warmth inside the structure faded, replaced by a creeping cold that seemed to rise from the earth rather than the air. He remained where he was, back against the wall, eyes open now, no longer pretending sleep was possible. Every instinct told him that closing his eyes would be a mistake. Outside, the ground shifted, not footsteps this time, something broader. He heard the faint press of weight, then release, as though the land itself were being tested. The sound moved farther out, then returned, tracing an uneven path around the structure. The wind followed. It came low and steady, sliding along the walls, slipping through gaps in the doorway. With it came a smell he hadn't noticed before. Old earth, dust, and something faintly bitter. Not decay. Something older. Something that had been buried and uncovered many times. The structure creaked softly, not from strain but from age, wood responding to pressure, to the change in air. He pressed his palm against the wall, grounding himself in its solidness. It felt firm, but the sensation unsettled him. The wall was warmer than it should have been, as though it were holding onto heat for a reason. Then the sounds began again. Voices, this time more than one. They rose and fell around him, overlapping, never quite forming words he could follow. Sometimes they seemed close, right outside the doorway. Other times they drifted farther away, blending into the wind. He had the distinct impression that they were not speaking to him, but around him, acknowledging his presence without addressing it. At one point, something brushed against the doorway. Not hard, not forceful, just enough to let him know it was there. He leaned forward slightly, heart pounding now despite his efforts to stay calm. The darkness beyond the doorway felt thicker than before, almost textured, as though it had depth. Then came the quiet. It dropped suddenly, unnaturally, cutting off every sound at once. No wind, no voices, no movement. The silence pressed in so tightly that it rang in his ears. In that silence he felt it, awareness, not directed like a stare, but broad, encompassing. As if the land itself had turned its attention inward, noting him as something out of place. He understood, without knowing how, that he was not being judged, but measured. A shape moved at the edge of the doorway. He did not look directly at it. He sensed it the way one senses someone standing too close behind. The shape did not cross the threshold. It lingered, motionless, as if bound by something older than the structure itself. Minutes passed, or seconds. Time no longer mattered. Then, slowly, the pressure lifted. The night sounds returned in fragments. The wind first, then distant movement far away. The voices did not come back. Whatever had gathered around the structure seemed to withdraw, retreating into the land as quietly as it had arrived. He remained still long after the silence broke, afraid that any movement might call it back. Only when the sky began to lighten faintly, barely perceptible, more felt than seen, did he allow himself to believe that the worst of the night had passed. But he knew better than to think it was over. The land had noticed him, and morning would decide what that meant. The first sign of morning was not light, but distance. The pressure that had filled the night slowly receded, as if something vast were stepping back. The air inside the structure grew easier to breathe. He remained still, unwilling to test the change, listening as the land settled into a quieter rhythm. When the sky finally began to pale, it did so reluctantly. A thin wash of grey replaced the darkness beyond the doorway. Shapes returned. The ground, the road, the low rise of land in the distance. Nothing moved. Nothing watched. The night had not fled, it had simply withdrawn. He waited until the sun touched the horizon before standing. Every joint protested as he rose, stiffness and exhaustion weighing heavily on him. He stepped outside carefully, half expecting the land to respond, but the morning air was still, cool, ordinary. The structure behind him looked smaller in daylight, weathered and empty, offering no sign of what had taken place. No tracks circled it, no marks disturbed the ground. The road lay quiet, stretching on as if nothing had happened. When he returned to the car, he noticed the engine light was off. He hesitated, then turned the key. The engine started immediately, smooth and untroubled. He did not linger. As he drove away, the land unfolded around him, wide, silent, and indifferent. The sun climbed higher, washing the night away piece by piece. Yet the sense of being watched did not follow him. It remained behind, contained within the place he had passed through. By the time he reached a town, the experience already felt distant, like something half remembered from a dream. He found no words to describe it that felt accurate. Some things, he understood, were not meant to be explained or shared freely. The land had allowed him to leave. That knowledge stayed with him long after the road carried him away, a quiet reminder that some places are not empty, and that survival sometimes is simply permission granted until morning.